Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Sound Decisions here on Passion for Sound. This time it's part 3 of my interview with Jason Stoddard from Schiit Audio. And in this part of the interview, he talks about a number of interesting things, including some more about the thoughts that go into product design, including something you may not have ever thought about. He also talks about the preference that Schiit has for multi-bit design DACs, such as the Bifrost 2. And I also ask him about the benefits of hybrid amps and why they like to combine solid state and tubes. So sit back, grab a cup of tea or a craft beer as Jason has, and enjoy part 3 of the interview with Jason Stoddard.
I think the more we can share these thought processes with the consumers, the more they'll sort of go, oh, okay, it's not always as simple as just going, let's move the switch. It's not that easy. So that's great.
If you want to talk about it's not that easy, I mean, here's a great example. We're contemplating a new product which will remain nameless, but it's basically a small product, kind of in the same form factor as a Jotunheim. Except, I'm like, God, to really get everything we need in this, we need maybe to be a couple inches deeper. And makes stacking a little weird, but it's not the end of the world. It'd be probably a bottom product anyway. And then Alex, our director of operations, goes, dude, so you want to add an entire new type of packaging to us? I'm like, huh. Oh, that's right. Because we basically have like kind of one box for the really small stuff, one box for the medium stuff, one box for the large medium stuff, and one box for the really big stuff. And we have a lot of boxes. I mean, it's actually embarrassing to go through our warehouse. It's like, look, we make boxes, apparently, because apparently about half of it is boxes. Yeah, that would be very bad. He's like, oh my God, another set of packaging? Are you kidding me? I'll kill myself. I'm like, well, that product's dead. At least for now, we'll see. If we decide that it actually, has a lot of potential, I'm sure we'll break the model. We've done it before, but we actually have to think about things like that. Does it fit in our current boxes? And that's why you'll see a lot of our stuff in various form factors, because we can stick it in the same box.
And that may sound to some people, that may sound like it's just boxes. What are you talking about? But I'm guessing there could be thousands of dollars in terms of the space required and the rent for that space, not to mention ordering all the boxes and having to carry the stock of those boxes. Yeah, that's going to add up, isn't it?
Yeah, the space requirement is a killer, and there's. And here's a great example of what we mean by local manufacturing. The box guy that we use is the same box guy that we've used since we were in a garage. He has no capability of actually warehousing anything. If we were a logical company, it'd be like, well, we're too big for you now. You can't warehouse anything for us. So we'll go to another manufacturer. We don't do that. We're sticking with him. He's great. Our essentially our packaging needs are all met. Everything is over packaged. We have no damage. We don't have to think about it. And it's like, okay, so we have to rent more space to store the boxes. Okay, that's fine. We'll do that. And that's just kind of the company we are. Call us idiots.
I think it's a dying breed to have organizations that think that way, that don't just do the cutthroat, well, you can't help us, push you aside, move on to the next thing. And look, I think obviously there's always got to be a balance point in business in terms of at what point do you have to say, we'd love to stay with you, but we have to move on. But I personally think it's nice to hear of companies that will honor that loyalty and that continued relationship. I mean, I'm outside of doing this, my paid work is I'm a consultant with businesses. So my entire livelihood relies on the loyalty and the ongoing relationships with those organizations. If they were to turn around one day and go, oh, you know what, you haven't got that one skill, we're going to push you aside and hire someone else, then yeah, I really respect the commitment to keeping those relationships going.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of it is also the devil I think a lot of businesses don't take into account the huge disruption that can cause by, say, churning suppliers. because you really don't know what you're getting into. We've been very stable, largely because we stick with the same people and we go through it. We'd rather work with them than to go, okay, fine, let's start over again. But by stable, it doesn't mean everyone's happy. We can't always meet demand. For example, we can't always do everything we want to do, and that's fine. I mean, let's put it this way: Mike and I are in this for a long haul. We're here to have fun. If we're not having fun, why do this at all? And we're both having the time of our lives right now. This is like by far. I was in the agency world before this, and this is by far the best business I've been in, largely because Mike and I can both be kind of like, Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. So if we did have that, you do not want to swim in our brown river. But the thing is, we get to kind of play and come up with things we like and hopefully other people like. And we listen to what people want. We try to, accommodate what works, within our philosophy. I'm sure eventually you'll probably talk to Mike and he'll bend your ear about high rate stuff and DSD and MQA and all this. Who cares? Whatever. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I fundamentally don't care because, I listen to Cobuzz and, it tops out at 24,192 and that's what we do and we're good. I might have a different opinion, if I had 8,000 SACDs, that I'd ripped, and had a whole bunch of DSD. Yeah. So there's room for lots of opinions there, but we have our own digital approach, much like Cord, salute the Cord because they're actually doing something different. It's not the same 3 chips in a box, which is the vast majority of digital these days. Their approach is different. PS Audio's is different. Ours is, equally different. We have our own opinions on that matter. And, that's why you'll see us doing what we call true multibit, which is highly integrated, deep multibit with a DSP, a digital signal processing, unique filter. And we have our own Unison USB input now, which is not XMOS and not CMedia and not anyone else's. So we're actually a USB licensee. So we're all very proud of that. We can be wrong. Don't know. Okay.
And I think, to me, that's the fascinating thing. The Cord interview was the very first one I did, and I came out of that, and like with all manufacturers, so there's no negative in what I'm about to say, but like with all manufacturers, they have, like you have, a belief that what they're doing is the right way to do it. It doesn't mean they think it's necessarily the only way to do it. And there's like you said here, we might be wrong, but it's the belief that we have that this is the way to do it. And I think that's where it's really valuable for having multiple manufacturers trying different things, is that they've each got their benefit and their flavor and their character that's great. And as I said before, I've had the Gumby for many years and loved it. It did get displaced by Cord Cutest eventually, but the thing for me is that they both have their own character, and I know absolute devotees of your multibit approach, just as I know devotees of the Cord FPGAs, and then again PS Audio, like you mentioned, DSD, Delta Sigma, etc. So there's lots of different approaches that are out there, and I just think it's great that we've got so many. We've kind of spoiled for choice with so many options out there doing such great work.
I would actually love to see more manufacturers doing more interesting things. I mean, I'm shorting some other guys. I mean, there's ExoGal and there's some other smaller manufacturers doing some really interesting stuff. But it's just like it's like, I don't know if it's your opinion, but it's like 10 years ago when we started, it's kind of like, well, if I have to do another Saber DAC, with using whatever you could do at the time, XMOS and Saber, and you could do 2x DSD or whatever. It's like, oh boy, that's boring. And now it's kind of like, it's more like either Saber or AKM, which is hilarious because no one was using AKM really, I think, except, we started the trend, and then now people are picking up AKM and Saber's still around. And we use both. We use the AKM products. They're good products. It's just that, like, above any kind of price point, we actually do believe that Multibit is better. It's inherently better, and so that's our approach. Multibit's been evolving quite a bit, though. We should send you a Bifrost too.
Okay, that'd be great.
Because that's actually it's really funny. As soon as I got a Bifrost 2 on my desk, I'm like, yeah, get this Yggdrasil out of here, just because it's so close and it's tiny.
Wow.
I don't want to deal with it anymore. And that one actually uses an IC output stage, and people ask me about that all the time. Why are you using ICs? I'm like, just listen to it. Just see what you think. It's like, I didn't even fight that fight, and usually I'm the first guy who goes to Mike and Dave. I will beat your ICs. I will do a discrete thing. I'll wipe it out. That's what I did at Theta, and that's what I did here. And and in this case, Dave did it. I listened to it and went, yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll hit Denise up for a Bifrost 2 to get on the channel ASAP. Then, by the sound of it,
it's a fun DAC. It's probably not the most resolving thing in the world, but it has so many of the qualities of an Yggdrasil. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm done.
Just to let you know, Schiit were kind enough to send me the Bifrost 2, and in fact, in a couple of weeks coming up, it's going to be Schiit week here on Passion for Sound. I've got both the Modius and the Bifrost 2. I'll put them back to back, a Wednesday and a Saturday release in Australian time, so they'll be coming up soon. Make sure you stay tuned and hear if I think the Bifrost 2 is as good as Jason suggested it is.
Okay, no, that's very interesting to me, because I think I alluded to before that musical engagement is more important to me than ultimate resolution. Obviously, if you can get both together, that's the holy grail, but I'll always take engagement first over resolution. So that's definitely piqued my interest.
Yeah, it's really funny, because that's actually what led to Modius, because everyone's like, I love Bifrost too, but it's it's the right size, it's right feature set, right everything, but oh my God, the price, it's hilarious, $700 US dollars. And we're like, well, okay, and people are like, can you do like a card for this or a card for that or what? And I'm like, I think I'd rather just do an inexpensive balanced output DAC, and that's what actually Modius became. So $199, there you go. It's a good DAC. Nothing particularly wrong with it. I enjoy it, but if you offer me that or Bifrost 2, that's one of the few products I'd be like, yeah, it might be actually better to spend the 3.5 times. God, I'm saying that I'm going to get eviscerated for that. People see the measurement, so it'd be like, oh, this thing's horrible. So
you can't. I've actually got a T-shirt I've been working on, because I'm still growing the channel. I've just released a T-shirt that actually literally says happiness is immeasurable, because ultimately, for me, that's what it comes down to. If you enjoy it, listen to it.
Yeah, it is. And I do actually think there's a strong subjective component, because when we were doing Magnius, I don't know if I did a chapter on this, but when we did Magnius, we actually had people take prototypes home as usual, and we had 2 prototypes. We actually had one that was kind of like a giant heresy, and one that was what we actually shipped with the TPA 6120 amp chip in it, in a compound amplifier configuration. And I liked the one that was kind of like heresy, and literally everyone else apparently on the planet liked the TPA 6120. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm biased because I've heard 6120 doesn't sound that good, or what. Over the years I've built up this bias, and I went ahead and took the 6120 home, and listened to it for a couple weekends and said, this is perfectly fine. I'm probably imagining things. It's probably my bias. And then we did a blind test, and it's like, okay, these are really hard to tell the difference. So we are splitting hairs. And so we ended up doing the TPA 6120 approach rather than the heresy approach, because I got outvoted, basically. I said, most people seem to like this better, and they could articulate why. where I had this kind of nebulous thing of like, well, I think it might be a little richer or something. And they're like, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, this is better. It has more detail. You know, it does this, it does that. Bass, but I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to fight this. And you know, I'm sure people will go, well, you should have fought it. It's like, well, you should probably have heard both of them, and you know, if you can pick them out in a blind test and tell me which one you like better, you know, I will absolutely take your opinion into consideration when we do
Yeah.
it.
Other than that, though, it's just speculation, isn't it?
Exactly. It's you know, like I said, I'll be first person to say I don't have all the answers, and you know, sometimes the more I do this, like the less I know.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? You're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, I'm working on a couple of new kind of bigger products, and they surprise me every day. It's like, how is this even possible that this, you know, this is doing this? And so I'm learning as we're going, and you know, we'll see. Like I said, what are we going to get out by the end of the year? Whatever we can, but it might be zero.
Yeah, hard to know at the moment, isn't it, with the world?
Don't know. Yeah, it's fine. We got other things to worry about, you know, the world in general.
Yep. No, very true. I think we've already answered this one, but while we're on the specific product topic, I'm guessing the answer to this goes down the path of engagement, enjoyment, etc. The hybrid style amps you make, like the Mjolnir, where you've combined solid state and tube.
Yeah.
There's obviously tube fans out there. I'm one of them. There's solid state fans out there. I guess I'm also one of those when it's done well.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning for bringing the two of them together in products like the Mjolnir for you guys?
It's funny you ask that, because I still at home I have a Mjolnir too. So you know, it's, even though it doesn't stack with Bifrost at all, I still use a Mjolnir too, and now I'm using a Ragnarok a bit because I have, you know, passive speakers on the desktop as well. But Mjolnir 2 or any hybrid, good question. Tubes are simply an alternate amplification device, an older one. Tubes are very, very low gain. They're also very linear, you know, for the type of device they are. People go, oh God, tubes have lots of distortion. It's like, for something that only has like 20 to 40 dB of gain, it's actually pretty linear, guys. I mean, you know, tubes are pretty solid for what they are. The problem is tubes don't have a lot of current output, which is what you need to either drive, you know, speakers or more demanding headphones. So we have one pure tube amp, Valhalla 2, which can't drive much of anything. You know, a 300 ohm headphone is great. A 600 ohm headphone is great. 150, it's like, it's probably fine. You start getting down to 50 or 32, it's rough because it simply has limited current output. It can only put out about, I think, 60 milliamps of current, which is very, very low compared to our other amps. Now, solid state stuff is great at putting out current. It's got a ton of capability there. So the dream is always, of course, mate tubes and solid state, give them both, you know, what they're good at. Tubes, you do voltage gain where it's nice and linear, it's happy, etc. And then you do solid state where it has lots of current gain, and you know, it does that and it's happy and linear. And the thing is that the subtleties, of course, of interfacing them is where things get interesting. The Mjolnir 2 is kind of one of our older approaches to it, where it is actually in high gain, it is open loop. There's no overall loop feedback at all. So it's basically just tube gain and a buffer, you know, output stage that's solid state, and that's it. And I really like the way that sounds, but that thing is going to skew warm and fun and big and happy, and a lot of people don't like that. So if you go into low gain and add a little bit of feedback, we get the low gain by adding feedback, it works, you know, it actually becomes more neutral. If you upped, you know, the gain of the tube stage and add even more feedback, then, you know, it gets even more neutral. That's, you know, that's kind of how Mjolnir goes. Mjolnir also has what they call interstage coupling caps. So you have a capacitor in between the tube stage and the output stage. to block the DC so that you can actually bias each one separately and they can both work, both work separately and everyone's happy. We now have a much more advanced way of doing that in Lear 3, which is it's another hybrid amp that we do. Lear 3 actually is direct coupled all the way through. It's DC in, DC between the tube and the output stage, DC out. And the management of that gets really interesting. It has to have, DC sense, DC protect. You have to, really watch out if someone inserts a tube the wrong way. It has to be able to protect against that, et cetera. And Lear 3 is really interesting because it still has tube gain and then a solid state output. And it has a little bit of feedback in low gain and more feedback. A little bit of feedback, high gain, more feedback, low gain. But a lot of people say, "Oh, that sounds more neutral. That sounds less like a tube." And it's like, it leaves me to wonder sometimes, like, okay, how much of tube amps is just like, you have coupling caps and you're hearing the capacitor, which is really kind of an interesting thing. Someday I'd love to actually do a pure tube amp that's like direct coupled to the tube output and see what that sounds like. It might sound horrible. It might sound great. I don't know. But the kind of the succinct answer to hybrids is we're trying to make the most of the strengths of both the solid state output and tube input. And I don't think I've ever seen one inverted where you have a solid state input and tube output. I'm sure someone could try that. Maybe with the transformer coupled out, which is something we've never done. We don't know much about it. So we're, if we don't think we can add to the conversation, we don't usually engage at all.
I just want to jump in here really quickly because I continue to see all around the internet this myth that tubes are these thick, old school, very specific sounding products. And the reality is they're not. There's a whole range of different tubes. There's a whole range of different tube amplifier designs. And certainly some of them are everything that they're described to be, but there's so many others out there that are not. So as Jason says here, tubes are very linear, relatively speaking, and whilst they don't have a huge amount of gain or current capability, they are an extremely enjoyable and can be a very transparent form of amplification that, whilst it may not measure as well as a chip or a discrete solid-state amplifier, it's certainly not something that I think anyone should ever discount. And as you can hear from Jason talking here, there are benefits to both approaches. And I just encourage everyone to keep their minds open. Don't get talked out of a solid state or a tube amp because someone says all of them are like this, because the reality is you can't generalize that much. I've heard cold, sterile solid state products, and I've heard thick, warm tubes. But I've also heard tubes sound like solid state in the case of the mainline here, and I've heard solid state sound thick and rich a bit like tubes in the case of something like the Burson Soloist, the original Soloist, that is, not the new one. So that's not to say that any particular sound is good or bad. Thick and rich can be great with the right headphones. Cool and lean can be great with the right headphones. But it's about keeping your mind open to enjoy the benefits that both solid state and tubes can bring. And in the case of Schiit, they're combining it into one product in some cases.
It's interesting what you say about the capacitor sound, because I've mentioned Bottlehead already, the crack and the, I don't know if I did it with the single-ended experimenter kit, but definitely the crack and the mainline I've tweaked with capacitors, and it makes such a huge difference to the sound. Not maybe quite as much as rolling tubes in the crack. That does definitely make a difference, but there's no doubt to me the capacitors have such a big impact in the voicing of the amplifier. So yeah, you might be onto something there.
Yeah, and the tubes do make a difference too. So I'm probably oversimplifying. Mjolnir 2 remains in the line because it's a good amp. It's also big, it runs very hot. It's definitely one of our least user friendly amps out there. Lear 3, I have one of those as well. I probably prefer the Mjolnir. That's not just because of price. I'll be happy to recommend our lowest priced gear to you guys. But it's more of a preference thing. The Mjolnir is probably one of our warmest sounding amps. It's one of our most relaxed sounding amps. So I like that. One of our reviewers who likes stuff that, to be frank, will take your head off with a cheese grater. The first time he heard Mjolnir 2, he's like, "Oh, you're going that way, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we are going that way." He's like, "Yeah, I know what you're going to say about it. That's fine. I get it. Not everyone can be like, super, super uber detail, and I'm not all that interested in it." So he's like, "Oh, this is your amp." I'm like, "Right, that's my amp."
And again, different strokes, different folks.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I like it. That's good.
That's it for part 3 of this interview. There is one more part to come, so if you're enjoying my conversation with Jason, do make sure you stick around and wait for part 4. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. For me, the highlight in part 4 was having the chance to ask Jason, someone who's experienced in designing amplifiers, how much power we really need. Time and time again, another myth that comes up that I get a bit frustrated with is this myth that we need buckets and buckets of power for headphones that realistically only need a few hundred milliwatts. When you do the maths, very few headphones actually need more than 1 watt of power. So I asked Jason specifically, how much power do we really need? And he gives a fantastic answer. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and I look forward to sharing part 4 of my interview with Jason Stoddard very soon here on Passion for Sound.